so I wanted to plumb a little deeper about that, about those comments and about the way in which you present and leading your congregation, and a congregation that is much like many of our congregations. How do we hear the news of this? How do we understand it as Christians? How do we understand it as people who follow after Jesus, who came to bring about peace? My peace I leave to you, in the Gospel of John. What does that mean for us to be peacemakers in the light of this war that is happening around us? And so I invited Matt to share a little bit about his experience tonight, and I hope that might provide a helpful perspective for our preachers in the pulpit and those of you who are in the pews, particularly as we get ready to celebrate Holy Week. And so Matt, to begin, if you could just share a little bit about your time of service in the armed forces, and also then as your call as a pastor, particularly at Mount Vernon.
Sure. Well, I served 8 years in the United States Army. I was in Iraq from November 2003 to April of 2005, attached to 1st Cavalry Division. I still go back there. The last time I was there was just pre-COVID, 2019, trying to form relationships and partnerships with the Reformed churches in Iraq. And I do that through the Iraqi Partnership Network that I'm part of. And even this war in Iran has very difficult reverberations that we can talk about in a little bit, about what that even means for Iraqis or people in Jordan, Syria, Lebanon. So I was a soldier in Iraq, and when I got out, I became a cartographer. I went to school for cartography, and I always say, if this is the 1500s, Pastor Mapmaker, I'm like Taylor Swift. Nowadays, nobody knows me, but I've been lucky enough to serve churches in San Antonio and in Bethel Park, and now in Elizabeth. And it's been a blessing to be able to do that.
Yeah, thanks, Matt, for doing that. So I wanted to ask a few questions as part of our time together, and hopefully it might be helpful for our churches and our pastors too. Can you share a little bit about what it's like for you personally to inhabit these two roles of being a veteran and as a pastor? And how do those experiences shape your understanding of the world and how you interpret moments like this that we are living in, and even how you show up in the pulpit and as you do your ministry among your people?
Yeah, and I meant to preface, veterans, like any other group, we're not a monolith. So I will just share my experience and how I feel and how God has led me through this time. The reality is the tension never leaves you. It's something you just kind of learn to carry. And when you're experiencing war firsthand, it's never in an abstract, okay? You watched it in real time. You felt the reverberations of mortars and IEDs. You lose friends. You have such community and purpose in the service. You don't fight for anybody else. You fight for your brothers and sisters. And the loss there is real. It's a weight that never really gets lifted. It's something that you just have to try to live with. But as a pastor, I'm called to stand in a different kind of space, one of hope, of truth-telling, and hopefully pointing people to Christ. And that's the overlap that I have, at least in my life. And so war is never simple. I'm always cautious of simple answers to complex things. So in the pulpit, I try to hold these two realities at the same time. One is honoring our men and women who served and sacrificed for freedom. And also holding that there's deep brokenness in what war reveals in our world. It shapes how I see moments like this. They're not headlines. They're human stories, and in turn, God's story. And it shapes how I preach. I don't preach with certainty about politics, but I try to speak with clarity to the gospel.
Yeah, that's really great. I think one of the things you've talked a little bit in our pre-conversation is that you've spent some time wrestling with those identities through a process you've called active reconciliation. So what does that mean for you? What is that process like? How does that ongoing work of reconciliation shape who you are today and your call as a pastor in your service?
Yeah. Leaving the service, it wasn't a clean break for me. It's a continuation of wrestling, and it really is. I had to come to terms with what I participated in, what I witnessed, and what I carry today. And that process is ongoing. So for reconciliation for me has meant bringing these experiences before God, not hiding them, not justifying them, but offering them to Jesus. It's meant learning to receive grace as not an abstract idea, but something that I desperately, desperately needed. It's meant seeking reconciliation beyond myself, being attentive to the ways that war fractures nations, souls, communities, and even our understanding of who is the other. As a pastor, that shapes everything, so I try to lead with humility. I try to create space for lament, and I try to remind people that reconciliation is the heart of the gospel. Yeah. And that's not just between us and God, but between each other. And so that while we need to reconcile with God, our shortcomings, the things I had to do or did do, I also have to recognize that God wants us to reconcile with each other.
So it's been a process that has been not only a one and done, right? But this is, I love the way you say active. It's actively turning things over and finding those moments where what else in my heart needs turned over, and what else in my openness to my neighbor needs to be turned over, and the way that then shapes the way you care for your people, but also helps you articulate clearly. You said with clarity of the gospel, like the gospel calls us to this constant sense of reconciliation, to the work of Jesus on the cross, to the peace that Jesus initiates for us, makes possible, and it's just opening ourselves up to that. In some ways, it means that we have to be less certain.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, reconciliation is a continuation. I think that's great. Like anything with God, you know, it's not these aren't concepts we like possess, right? They're like verbs, they're actions. You know, like I have faith in Jesus. Well, I'm done. You know, it's like, oh, I reconciled. Reconciliation is a constant process, especially when we talk about like the ripple effect of what war actually does in all aspects of life.
Right. Yeah, and that's a great way to segue the question about that ripple effects of war. Like, what does that look like for you? I mean, I think for the average person is that we are so distant from it. Iran is so far away from the United States, we think, right? We also live in a time where there is more electronic, automated sense of war. And when we were preparing, you were saying that, you know, you could be someplace in the United States and push a button and a missile is launched, you know, so there's increasingly more distant approach to war, which I'm thinking about Brian Stevenson, who wrote, talking about being proximate to things, and how that, in his book, Just Mercy, like we become more merciful, we become more understanding because we're proximate. And I think having this distance from war makes us apathetic. It makes us not understanding just how horrific war is, and all of the multiple dimensions that an event will ripple out to the population, and so much more. So can you talk a little bit for that, so folks might understand just the nature of that? Yeah,
I think you're right. Like, you know, what is our complicity in this war? That's a hard question. Many of us would think maybe not at all. You know, we see the TV, we see the explosions, and the things falling apart. What we don't see is the veterans who take their own lives coming home. We don't see the family struggling when a veteran comes back and is a completely changed and different human being. We don't see the struggle from the children, from the wife, the moral injuries, the questions that they have to ask themselves about what was lost and what have I taken from others. War doesn't end when it's declared. It echoes. I wish we would sit in that reality a little bit more. You know, I'll talk just simply about Iraq. There was estimated 5 to 6 million displaced people. Okay, that's almost half of the population of Pennsylvania. So you have generations of separation between children and parents, spouses, increased poverty, oversized loads on churches and other places that have to try to take all these people in. What it does economically to people like the Yazidi people, if you've never heard of the Yazidi people or northern Iraq, the Iraqi fighting force, it was very diminished. And ISIS or ISIL or Daesh, whatever people are comfortable with calling this group, terrorized, took sex slaves, just destroyed almost an entire community of people. And all of this, I have a friend in Iraq now, his wife has cancer. He's scared to take her to the hospital because it could be targeted in a strike. And the thing is, these go on for generations, generations.
Yeah, the trauma is extended from not just located in this particular time set, but over and over and over again. What do you think right now, for people to understand, what do you see as the ripples that are happening right now in Iran, and as the campaign continues to go on? What do you see in the midst right now? Like, what do you see in that?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about personally of like things like where the war stands now without boots on the ground.
Yeah.
What does that mean for the guy who's sitting in a box in Georgia that pushes a button that sends a missile and destroys a building?
Right.
And then he walks home and has dinner with his children. What does that do spiritually, emotionally to that person? And then we looked at places like Iraq and Iran. If your home's destroyed, or numerous homes are destroyed, where do you work? How do you get money? Where do you go? We think displaced people, like I saw as Christians were kicked out of Mosul and they walked to Erbil, hundreds of miles. And what do you carry in a desert? If I had to carry 2 gallons of water up these steps, I would need at least 3 breaks.
Right, right, yeah.
Let alone some toys for your children, some keepsakes. And now you've completely removed these people from everything they've known and doubled the population of another area. And now there's not enough work, not enough space to live, not enough resources. And what kind of reverberates from those kind of things? It'll take us generations to get people back to simply where they were. Now, I'm not as naive to think, because I think sometimes I don't trust in God enough, in the sense that when I see evil people committing violence, Saddam Hussein was an evil dictator. They raped, they murdered, he gassed the Kurdish people in the north. And it's hard for us to imagine in our earthly bodies, how do we stop such evil violence without using violence?
Right.
And sometimes I wonder for myself if it's not a trust issue, because I can't conceptualize a way to stop somebody doing that.
Without meeting force and strength.
Without force and strength, right.
Right, yeah.
Right.
And so that is a just quietness, like an unsettledness in the spirit. And I wonder whether even right now it's just like, if there's anything we can do is to recognize that unsettledness. Like, there are no simple answers to this.
No.
And there are real people hurting, and this generational, and it'll be magnified. If the campaign is 6 weeks, it'll be magnified years after that. So just to sit with that kind of uneasiness, how have you done that? How can you help other people process about sitting in that unease? I think it's holy work. That's why I'm curious, because I think when we sit with something that's discomforted, Scripture tells us to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. So some like us who are the comfortable right now, how can we be living that affliction to see the pain and the agony and the violence that is enacted in our neighbor?
Yeah, I would start with empathy, right? Like recognizing what is actually happening, what we're doing, the things we just talked about, both to our soldiers and to their people, including children.
Right. Yeah.
That we are going to completely uproot and really damage the future of what that child is. So we first have to understand it's not just a building crumbling to the ground. It's lives. It's children of God. It's peace. We are disrupting what God has set before us and made holy. We are destroying. Now, just because somebody else started destroying it doesn't give us the aptitude to go ahead and destroy further.
Yeah, that's helpful.
But, I think the more we can understand others' plights, the sooner we'll be able to get to reconciliation. Like, we need to know the need to reconcile. It's a weight that I will probably carry with me my whole life.
Right.
Is this want and need for reconciliation, as I still see people over there struggling. Some of these Reformed churches had 300-400 people in them, and are down to about 40 people. And so we're talking about the Word of God that's been there, they would say, since Thomas took it on his way to India. I don't know. But centuries and centuries, and way before we had a nation, right?
Right.
And now we're talking about it could be on the brink of not existing there.
Yeah. There a Christian presence in Iraq and in other places.
In Iran as well.
Right. And so, and I think that's something we forget as folks who are not totally aware of the significant and historic Christian presence in the Middle East and how it is evaporating.
Well, certainly when we start labeling Muslim nation, Christian nation, we're really diluting what God has consecrated, is that we all belong to God.
Yeah, that's right. That we're not seeing each other as beloved. Yeah.
But even we know it's statistically also not true. Like in Iraq, you can be a Christian. It's 1% of the population. It's probably a little bit less now, but they are Christians, brothers and sisters as well.
Right. So the other thing I want to talk about is, if we talk about a distinctive Christian witness, what does it mean for us about cultivating one, both for the preacher and the person in the pew that might engage this moment? I think you've already kind of talked about this, about leaning into empathy, acknowledging the image of God in our neighbor who is in Iran, who is in Iraq. That's a place, a starting point. I think, though, our temptation is high in our very polarized, partisan country that we live in this time, that we're not sure about, should we go there? Are we going to step on some toes in the process? How do we speak into that moment, not by our tribal identities in politics, but as people who are shaped by our discipleship in Jesus Christ, formed in our baptismal identities as people who belong to God, who belong to Jesus, who walk in his way in truth and life. What does that look like for you? What would you say?
Well, I think you said it right. Like, our identity is not Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, whatever. Our identity is baptismal.
Right.
It is who God has made us. And so we have to live in this uncomfortableness.
Yeah.
And the more we try to get, politicians divide, Christ unites. And so we have to first and foremost recognize we should be grieving war and loss on both sides. Like, we can't simply think it's us versus them.
You said a little bit about lament. Is that where you would find that here earlier? About the power of lament?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about, how do you justify war? And there's been how many books written on just war theory, and I've sat with chaplains at their national conference, military chaplains, and just war theory. But how can you justify the loss of life? And the question comes, can we lament and grieve for the damage that we have done to others? Or are we only recognizing the lament of the things that happened to us?
Oh, wow. Yeah. How would you encourage folks in the pews and the preacher in the pulpit in that way? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah.
How have you been able to do that?
I don't know that I have been able to. When we talked earlier about complicity, I feel, obviously, as a soldier that went, witnessed, shared, took part in.
Yeah.
I feel that fully complicit in the damage that has been done. So lament, I guess, in this case, comes easy to me. I've seen the damage firsthand. I've felt the pain. And when we went back on that trip, there's been times where I've sat with young men and apologized if I've hurt them or done them. We wrote that overture on removing depleted uranium from Iraq because, uranium is dense and, it's not going to give them cancer, but it's a heavy metal. Think like lead in the Flint, Michigan drinking water. Like the heavy metals, especially in an arid climate, could deteriorate. That stuff has a shelf life of like 1 billion years or more. Like, what is our complicity in that?
What's our responsibility?
What's our responsibility? So as an American, say if I didn't serve, what is my responsibility in lament? What is my responsibility in reconciliation if I didn't vote this way, or I don't think this is a good thing? What is our responsibility in those type of actions?
Right, and in some ways it's just surfacing the questions.
Yeah.
Because that is an uncomfortable place to be in at times, to say, this is happening around me. I don't understand it. I don't understand how to reconcile it with my faith. I don't understand the full effects of war. But to open myself up to hear the pain and the suffering of somebody who I don't know, who doesn't look like me, who's been affected by, as an innocent person, caught up in this. So the soldier who comes home, how do I respond to that? But I think in some ways you're inviting us to surface the question, like, we should be thinking deeply about this. We should be praying deeply.
Absolutely, yeah. Our hope is in Jesus Christ, not military strength.
Right.
And what you said just summed something in my brain is, it's easy for me, even for myself, to get caught up in like the damages I might have caused in war, and forget about the damages I caused to my relationships when I came back as a broken, angry, bitter human being.
Yeah.
The damage that I did to almost every relationship I had, which would be almost completely destroyed. And I should be lamenting those things as well, and reconciling those things. Yeah. And sometimes they can be harder because people would say, well, I understand. But the understanding doesn't take away the pain that occurred through that.
What has been the gift of that reconciliation for you? Even though, like, I can imagine people in the good ways are saying, well, I know that was a hard time for you, but it seems like it did something for you.
No.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding.
Like, well, maybe not.
You know what? It has brought me a sense of the peace that surpasses understanding.
Yeah.
I have a comfort in my soul and a peace in my soul, and it's not a lovey-dovey, fuzzy kind of thing of like, oh, that really felt good. Like, you're helping somebody at a food bank where you're just like, oh, that really felt good. It often still has a heaviness to it. Like, I can still feel the weight of the damage that was done. But what I know that has come from it is I've been able to build relationships with others. I've been able to further live into what God has called me to do. And none of that would be possible without the first steps in reconciliation.
Wow. That's such a really wonderful testimony. And I think in some ways we think of it like everything has to be this big splash.
Yeah.
But you've just kind of really brought it so that can be held and so personal, like to say it's one-to-one.
Yeah.
It moves beyond that. In just the same way there's ripple effects of war, there's ripple effects of peace and reconciliation. And we would want to be on that side of it. Even something that seems so small has profound effect and impact.
Yeah, and I would give the example of, one of the pastors in Iraq hugged me and forgave me. And if I had 100 pounds on my shoulder, it felt like he took off 50.
50 of it, yeah.
So the burden did feel lighter, but it's still a burden that I'm going to carry with me. And I don't know how we get rid of that, I guess that's the promise that Jesus has for us. There will be this time where there's no pain and suffering, and
there's no crying, no mourning. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be embodied. We'll have our scars like he had on us. We'll have our mental and physical scars. They just won't hurt anymore.
Right.
And so, how can I, in this world, ever feel like I could ever do enough that would take away the pain I caused? I doubt that I could. But it, I guess, numbs it. It's probably a bad answer, but it's how it feels.
Yeah. I appreciate that. It's a heaviness, even if it's lightened. And thanks for sharing that, Matt. So I think the other thing I want to talk about is that we are now 4 weeks into this war with Iran, conflict with Iran. I know there's ways that they're labeling, but we also know that as we are getting ready to lead up to Holy Week, we're getting ready to have Palm Sunday. Folks are getting their palms figured out. They're going to begin their services with a processional welcoming Jesus. Jesus enters into the city of Jerusalem, and in Matthew's text, there's a sense of there's sense of fear and trepidation. What's going to happen here? Even though there is this shouts of joy and acclamation, and I think about how do we understand this season as we get closer to this holiest of week, to say, what does it mean for us, for Jesus to enter into this time? Where do we see Jesus needing to enter in to our own kinds of Holy Week reality, of knowing that we'll head to the cross, knowing that we'll head to a place of suffering and brokenness, and what might we wrestle with that in terms of how we're in this shadow of this military campaign and of war that is around us? Is there a message there that we can speak into in people who follow after Jesus this week?
Yeah. You came to my church, you clearly didn't hear the sermon. He comes on a donkey, not a war horse.
Right.
The expectations are flipped. Jesus could have came and conquered through violence, but he chose to absorb it instead. He didn't destroy his enemies, he died for his enemies. And in a world like Iran, where there's bombs falling and there's fires burning, that actually matters.
Yeah.
It matters a lot, because it reminds us that God is not absent from suffering. God entered into suffering.
Right.
Jesus walks at the center of human violence and refuses to return it in kind. And so often, where is Jesus in the midst of this turmoil? We know he walks with those who are suffering. He's holding the children in the rubble.
Yeah.
He's sitting with the women in fear and the men thinking they're defending their homeland. So where is Jesus in our present reality in the midst of war? He's entering where there's suffering, where there's fear, and he's in the midst of this machinery of violence.
Yeah.
And so as we think about bombing land or buildings, we're actually bombing a place where Jesus is walking with people in the midst of suffering.
So that speaks to that there is no place in which God's presence will not enter in, right?
I would think so, yeah.
And the fullness of the cross tells us so. That if Jesus did not even take away the sense of the extreme brokenness, despair, the almost close to victory of death at the cross, then that compels us to know that even in the most profound sense of suffering, that is where Jesus shows up, that Jesus enters into those places.
Okay.
And if that is the case, what do we take as people who follow this Jesus to the cross? What does that do for us? What does that mean for us as the people who try to be faithful?
Yeah, those are great questions. We have such human reactions to especially primal things like violence and fear. But if we were to follow Jesus, Jesus, that's costly love.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about having these conversations, they can be costly. They will be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But if we're truly going to follow Jesus, we have to follow him in every aspect. And he's one that entered into suffering, the one that sought peacekeeping. It called us to be peacemakers, not peacekeepers, but peacemakers, actively seeking peace and reconciliation. And so I think that's the work that is left before us. That's the work of the cross.
Is that where you find hope?
Yeah, I would hope so. I don't want to get fired.
So,
Of course, that's where. Yeah,
right.
I mean, that's the whole thing. That's not only where I find hope. I would hope that it's where everybody finds hope. That this is the Savior we have, and because of that, we have hope, and we should follow Him to the cross.
So in the midst of the chaos and confusion, headlines, all of those things, if we could do anything, we just follow Jesus.
Right, but it has to be the Jesus of the gospel, right?
Right,
It's the one that
yes.
rides on the donkey and not the war horse.
Right. Yeah.
You know, I think that story really illustrates that sometimes we get our wires crossed and Jesus kind of becomes a mishmash of what's in the Gospels, what our principles are, things that affect us. And that's not who Jesus was. I often wonder, like, would I recognize Jesus if He came back?
Right.
You know, because I would probably have expectations, and it wouldn't be like lowly on a donkey in the Middle East.
Right.
It would probably be my vision of Him, this big, large, powerful, almost, you know, take control kind of thing. And Jesus constantly is changing that expectation. And so when I said earlier, like, I can't conceptualize how to stop evil people inflicting violence, Jesus can. And so, you know, we'll give a safe one. How do we stop Hitler? Should we have just stayed back, you know? The thing is, we've never, ever tried to stop violence through peacemaking in the name of Jesus Christ. We're always too fearful that it won't be enough.
It won't be enough. Yeah. Yeah, and that is our human tendency, right? And so we're always looking for ways to exert our own sense of control.
Right, right.
And so if you had a word to encourage pastors who are going into the pulpit, getting their message ready, people are in the pews, what would be that as we head into these last days of Lent and as we prepare for Easter in the midst of conflict and war and violence?
Yeah, I guess it would just be shalom, right? It's the sense of peace, but it's wholeness, it's contentness in what God made you, but also in what God made for us, this world. That we should be actively seeking ways to stop violence, not with violence, but actively trusting in Jesus Christ, and that's reconciliation work. You know, the more we can share in costly love that recognizes suffering and sit with it, the longer we do that and the more empathetic we can be, the stronger we can be in the hope of the cross. Because that's the work that Jesus did. That's the peacemaking that Jesus is talking about. It's not absolutely passive that we don't do anything or we don't engage with it. It's sitting in the uncomfortableness of knowing the pain that this is going to cause and trying to see that so that we can reconcile with each other and with God.
Well, thanks, Matt, for taking time to talk with me and sharing your story and your message, and also giving us a sense of encouragement in the midst of all that is happening, even as we are preparing to celebrate and walk with Jesus through Palm Sunday to the cross and to the surprise of the empty tomb on Easter Sunday. So I really appreciate you taking time. And I hope and thank everyone for watching and listening to this story. And I hope it might encourage you and your particular witness as you seek to follow the Prince of Peace.